Welcome to another edition of the Daily Night Podcast. I am your host, Brian Smith, and today is a review of a couple of press conferences that I thought were pretty interesting from players, as well as Travis Williams, the co-defense coordinator for the Knights. Going to discuss what I had already kind of thought and now have fortunately been able to verify some of it and put it into context after the press conferences. The two players, Johnny Richardson and Josh Seliskar. Richardson, obviously a running back. Celiscar is an edge player, outside linebacker, defensive end. And then you have Travis, who discussed the entirety of the defense, what they've been trying to go ahead and figure out this spring and try to get better. He talked about some of the players' scheme, attitude, the whole 9 yards. He's really good at press conferences. First things first, let's start off with Travis and his thoughts. He's a good guy and pretty blunt. He offered something that is about as rare as you will ever see a coach offer at a press conference. Today is Thursday. He said that the Tuesday practice wasn't very good, and nobody had asked him. He just said it just wasn't. He said they had a plan, though. The plan was very simple. They weren't going to really get on the guys about chasing the ball down, getting 11 helmets to the football. They just wanted to observe, see who the leaders were, see which guys would get after it. You know, some guys are tired, whatever it may be. Just observe. They go back, they watch the film, etc. And I'm sure they kind of noticed during practice. Anyway, as he said, it didn't meet the standard. He said it 2 or 3 times in the clip where he mentioned it. A, good for him for being honest about his team. B, more importantly, to be truthful, he went and he said, we corrected it. We got on guys, talked about leadership. Some of the older players have to do certain things, setting the standard from a player and a coaching perspective. Further, the players did it. And I'll get into that when I discuss Celiscar in a moment. But this is an important step. Sometimes coaches overcomplicate things. Football is a process, and he said it, and ironically, he mentioned in the press conference as well. Coach Williams said that it is a developmental sport, talking about football. 100% true. It's the most complex sport on earth because you have a lot of large men running into each other and doing it really fast. There's many different things that are going on within a 5-foot radius of somebody's helmet, and there's 11 of them on each side, and there's so many different possibilities. Coaching it is very complex. Just one play can be a half-hour teaching moment in a film room, literally. So that's good to know that they're still going on the basic stuff. If you don't get hats to the ball, you can have the wrong call. And he mentioned this as well. You know, the call wasn't great, but if you hustle, you use athleticism, use the speed that you're given, you can still make it a creative and productive play. You know, if you want to give up 3 or 4 yards, you live to go to another down. That's very important. These are the types of things that I've been told by SEC coaches who've been to the playoffs, etc. It's a microcosm. If you do not attack the football across the board defensively, you are going to get smoked by quality offenses. I don't care if it's the American Athletic Conference, the Big 12 that they're going into in 2023, or any other league at any other level. Teams will gash you. You must run to the football, period. That's point 1. Point 2, going into the press conference, I had a short little list that I texted to myself on things that I wanted to hear about. If I didn't hear it from somebody else in the media, I wanted to ask. And the number 1 thing on my board, and this is something I'm going to get to on my list, I'm doing a countdown of 15 most important players as it relates specifically to spring practice, things they need to do, and how they help the team. Keyword here is team. And one of those players that's coming up is Lee Hunter. He's the nose guard coming over from Auburn. And Travis has known him since he was in like 8th, 9th grade. He was one of those guys that was just massive as a young man. Everybody knew he was going to be a national recruit. And he was. Goes to Auburn, doesn't work out, transfers to UCF. This is his first spring as a Knight. And he said flat out, he can move people. Like Travis is an emotional and expressive human being. But when he talked about Lee Hunter, the words were important. His volume was important, but his expression was vastly different than anything else. you could tell it was just a reminder of why you recruit guys like this. There are certain players, very few, that can do things that other human beings flat out can't even imagine. When Lee Hunter puts hands on you, this is just something I saw from high school film, and he decides that he's going to go, if you know what I mean, you better hold on. And he's 320 pounds with a lot of quickness, which doesn't sound normal, and it's not. The more he gets in shape, the more he's ready, the more he uses technique, the more he follows his cues, his technique, and everything together, the scheme, playing off the other guy that he's playing with inside, the edge defenders, the whole 9 yards, he can be the most dominant player in this league from day one. There is not another player like Hunter in the American Athletic Conference. I will, without scouting it, I will guarantee you that. They're just not. He's one of the rarest kids in college football because he's a nose guard that can two-gap, meaning he can literally just take a guy and look and choose which side he wants to go because the 300-pounder in front of him, he can manhandle him. But he's also quick enough to shoot a gap and eat up a running back that's Johnny Richardson size. That's called a future NFL player. That's what that is. And the reason I bring him up is not only is he a future NFL player, he's at the point of attack. The football starts at the center. It's basic as it gets. He's the closest man to where the football is going to start out at, and he might be the guy that gets there first. Very few nose guards make quote-unquote tackles, plays in the backfield, because they're doubled. They're usually doubled, even if they're mediocre, because you're just, as an offense, you're afraid of miscue, anything like that. The guard in the center, depending on the right or left, how it's lined up, will at least initially double team. Lee is quick enough to kind of get in the gap and get going sideways a little bit and squeeze in through there and use his power and just blow up a play against two guys, not just one, against two. That's the kind of thing that I wanted to see. The look on Travis's face said more than what he told me, and his answer was direct. He answered exactly what I expected him to say. He's, at the end he goes, and that's always a good thing, talking about moving guys. You can just move people. You remember, UCF's offensive line is extremely experienced, and it's massive. For him to move guys, that says something. Now, the other part of that is this. I mentioned to Travis that I wanted to know what they were doing with KD McDaniel. He's the transfer from Kentucky, another SEC kid. South Georgia guy ended up going to Kentucky, didn't work out. He's got a couple of years to play. He's pretty good size, 245, 250, somewhere in that range. And I said, are you going to play him down or are you going to play him standing up? And I figured they would, for whatever reason, they would pick one or the other to start and just kind of let him figure it out in their scheme, how they want him to play, etc. Wholeheartedly believe that. Coach Williams said that they're doing a little of both. He said, we're going to ask him to do some things to take on some guys. They might play him head up. They might play him in a 4-eye, means you slightly shade it inside instead of being just straight up, maybe just a couple inches inside. Sometimes you play a 5 technique, which means you'll play just outside the tackles. Like if a right tackle, you'd play outside. On the left tackle, you'd play on this side. It's one of those deals where he's going to have different responsibilities. And in addition to that, they're going to play him some at like what they call a jack position in some defenses, the edge rusher, the Lawrence Taylor position. There's all kinds of ways you can define it. Pass rusher. That's the simplest way to look at it. It's a good sign that they trust McDaniel with this because you're talking about a guy that is going to be very key. Pass rusher next to quarterback, one can argue, is the most important position on a football field on any given play. Simple as that. You not only can sack quarterback, of course, if it's a run, you've got an outside edge, you're defending an entire territory, not just a little section. Because if you get outside of the defensive end or the edge defender, however you want to call it, oftentimes a running back is going to get 10, 15 yards before he even gets touched. There's only one other guy out there usually, and that's a corner, and they're usually not the greatest run defenders. So it's important. He's already been given the responsibility to play one and another position that are very difficult. There's a lot of physicality. There's a lot of mental that goes into playing, especially the down position. Sometimes you'll go inside. Sometimes you go outside, and that's interesting. And UCF does a little bit of that with how they use the stand-up edge position. I'm not sure if they'll complicate it more. They gave Big Cat Bryant a lot of freedom last year, and he charged downhill. That's what I expect they'll do with KD. We won't know until he gets out there. And of course, Tre'mon and Josh Seliskar, they're adding depth. They have more depth this year. Whether or not they replace Big Cat completely, I don't know, but the depth should be as good, if not better, from game one on. And that's the key here, is recruiting in different ways for UCF has gone good. And that really impresses me that Travis and the rest of the defensive staff has said, hey, we're going to give you this and this. Unless you've played it, unless you sit around in meeting rooms with coaches talking about all these different techniques and where you line up and your hand placement, basically the nerdy part of football, what I'm saying is probably not going to hit you as much, but it's a lot of mental stuff. And that's good that he's going to get that through spring, and they don't have time to work on it in the summer in UCF scheme. I don't care what he ran at Kentucky. It's although helpful because they're very well coached there at Kentucky. They do a good job with their defensive players. You got to learn it here. Football, again, is a developmental sport. At every place you go, you start over to a certain degree. There are certain things that come with you, but just little nuances here or there can be the difference between a 1-yard loss and a 20-yard gain. So that's important. The other thing that I wanted to kind of learn about with Coach Williams, just listening to him and talking about it, he didn't seem overwhelmed with the scheme. He mentioned, and he was very happy, I might add, that UCF, they're not implementing the scheme. This is how we do it. This is who we are. All that stuff in year one, you have to do it. But, man, huge waste of time as it relates to installing what you got to do actually during games. This year, they can bypass all of that, and they're teaching. He said, hey, I tell them, I don't want to reteach something that I did last year. You guys should already know it. He kind of went through some of that. He was honest. That's good to know. I didn't have to ask it. It came up in general in the questioning, and he brought it up. Somebody said, what's different this year compared to last? And he just hammered it. I'm like, oh, there we go. I don't have to bring that up. That's a really, really important factor. UCF has taken the step that they should, but you got to ask. And he was just blunt. So that's very good. Now the two players. First up, since we were just talking about Coach Williams on the defensive side, Josh Seliskar. He's an edge defender, much like Katie McDaniel. And he mentioned how he has to get on guys in reference to what I mentioned earlier about Tuesday's practice, that he came in. He's working with KD. He's working with other guys. He's trying to take a leadership role, be more vocal. He's a junior now. He's a very experienced player for the Knights. And Josh, it just seems very confident. I mean, he had a good sophomore year, but there's like something a little different about him, and I thought that was unique. There's no one way I can describe it. I have a hard time even defining it in my own head, but his body language is a little different. His maturity was certainly very evident. And he was just a guy that wants to get it done. He seemed to be very businesslike, for lack of a better term. I like to see that from a guy that's going into his junior year, because the light should come on. It's his second year in the program as well with this group, plus his freshman year, his third year of college football he's getting ready to enter. He should have it kind of figured out, and he's a big dude. He's 250, give or take, and he's not somebody that is going to show up at the quarterback with very nice intentions. I expect him to not only be one of the leaders in terms of statistics in the front seven, but some of those intangibles that you have to have when you're playing quality competition, the Louisville game, the Cincinnati game, the SMU game, the Georgia Tech game, or any other game like Tulane, I think is going to be a game that will give them some struggles this year. It's on the road, and they gave them struggles at UCF last year. That's a more experienced unit this year. When the chips are down or it's a close game, it's a 3rd and 2, and you got to get the ball back to score, these are the kind of players you want to have. Josh just impressed in terms of his maturity, and that gives me a little more confidence about the front seven, which I thought was going to be good anyway. But when you combine what Travis said, what Josh said, and then just kind of the overall thoughts about McDaniel and Hunter, the two key guys they had there. And there was a little bit of talk about Terence. He can do mental reps and stuff. Travis did mention that. Terence Lewis, the incredibly talented linebacker. He's not full go yet, but he is going to be a stud for UCF at linebacker. I didn't even ask about him. I know he's a star in the making. He just has to stay healthy. I personally believe that UCF will have the best front seven in the American Athletic Conference. And I don't really think it'll be that close because barring injury, got to throw that out there, especially after last season, they had over 25 guys leave the program in one way, shape, or form, most of which were injury. Knock on wood. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. But here's why I say that. Nobody has Lee Hunter. Next to him is Ricky Barber, who's probably also going to get paid to play football. You have Tre'mon Morris-Brash, who I believe is flat out the best football player on the team in terms of just raw talent at one edge. You've got Josh, who I don't know how they're going to – he'll probably play on both sides. Seliskar, and you have KD McDaniel. Your edges are good, and you have other linemen coming up. We'll see how they line them up. I'm not going to say anything until I see them in the spring game. The front seven, you can move a lot of pieces around with what Travis Williams and the defense do. They run a 3-3-5, 4-2-5, 4-3. They mix and match. The guys are all over. Positions are not really relevant. It's more about the names. But they're going to have a lot of guys that are SEC-level players in a G5 league. I just don't think many teams are going to be able to run the ball on them. My only concern is depth at linebacker, and that's been discussed ad nauseum. Fair enough. Barring injury, UCF should be the best front seven. The secondary is very experienced now. They just need to take, quote-unquote, the next step and start getting picks. Last year, they let some of those picks get away. But if they stay healthy and they get some of those picks, they'll be the number one defense in the league. Fully believe that because they're very athletic. Now they are also in the year 2, so that's important. Final part to this, and this is something I wrote about just a few minutes ago at Inside the Knights. You can check it out. Just Google Inside the Knights or go and check out my Twitter handle. You got it here on the screen. If you are a fan of college athletics across the board, this story is of importance to you. Johnny Richardson is one hell of a football player. That's not really been in debate at any point that I can think of. But he's a rather shy and withdrawn kind of guy. He's just quiet. Last year after a game at an interview, he was quiet, very short answers. You could tell he just wanted to get in and get out. No big deal, but he wasn't all that informative. Today at the press conference, I see him walking up, and I'm like, I'm not sure how this is going to go. And he expanded a lot more. He was confident. He was smiling. He was using deductive logic on some tough questions, pointing out exactly what he needed to do, talking about his progressions and things that he needed to improve upon on the football field. And it was very calculated. This is what college is supposed to be, not just for regular students, but student athletes. Johnny Richardson has improved. On the field, yes. Off the field, yes. And that's the important part here. Not every guy takes it serious, but I can tell he's taken his craft on the gridiron, and he's also applied it in the classroom. I don't know if they've worked with him on public speaking, but most people hate public speaking as much as anything they will ever do in their life. I'm one of the few people that like it. I'm not saying I'm great at it. I'm all right, but some people are just like petrified. Johnny wasn't that, but he's just so quiet. He needed to work on it, and he improved immensely. This is why education is so important, and I'm glad to see it. The other thing, and might as well just talk about what Johnny really tried to hammer home to us in the media, he said he needed to be more patient. Fair enough. He said that sometimes he would just go too quickly, didn't allow the holes to develop, and he didn't maximize. Sometimes guys do that. That's fair. Johnny Richardson is an absolute burner, and if he does reach that second level, there aren't a lot of guys going to catch it because the guys at the second level then got to try to make a tackle with a definitive amount of space between them and a 170-pound jackrabbit. It's not a lot of fun. That's why he averaged over 7 yards a carry last year and why he is one of the most explosive players in all of college football with 2 more years of eligibility, plus, well, technically 3. I doubt he's going to come back for that, but you got the COVID year in 20 as well. He's just one of those guys that I don't think anybody is going to really count on him necessarily from other teams, but he's got a chance to run for just as many yards, if not more, than Bowser again this year, even if Isaiah is healthy, because they're going to get beat up with Bowser, and then they're going to bring in the jackrabbit after they're tired. It's a great 1-2 punch. And they also have some other guys like RJ is coming back. We talked about that a little bit at the press conference. And there's also Mark Anthony Richard. I mean, this is a loaded backfield. UCF is good. He mentioned the running back situation. The freshman is doing well. Jordan McDaniel, they are loaded at running back. The only question is who it is for each game. That'll take care of itself. So with that, before I wrap up, a couple of quick notes. I'm going to be doing some prospect profiles as I continue. We're getting towards the end of spring, a lot of the 7-on-7. I've been to 4 different Under Armour camps. I've been to Miami, been to Atlanta, been to Dallas, been to Columbus, Ohio, been to several big tournaments for 7-on-7. There's one in Plant City. This weekend I'm going to be at just outside of Tampa where I live. Pretty much seen about everybody in Florida that I want that's in Central or South Florida. There's a couple exceptions, but not many. And to be honest, I have more to write than I can possibly write. State of Florida, as usual, is tremendous. And even by Florida standards, the class of 23 that's getting ready to be the seniors in the fall is one of the best that it's ever been. It's incredible. So I'm going to have a lot of prospect profiles up. You can catch them again at Inside the Nights. I'm going to be doing some podcasts just going over film. I have a show called the FGA Reports, very similar to this one. It's on my YouTube channel you can check out. And it is also like this show that goes on Facebook and Twitter. It is its own show and its own place on Facebook as well, the FGA Report. It's Florida, Georgia, Alabama. A lot of the kids that UCF is recruiting will be on that specific Facebook page, and some of it will cross over into the Inside the Nights Facebook page as well. But there's just going to be a lot of recruiting stuff between now and the end of June. It's going to be insane. UCF has really shot for the moon on a lot of kids. I don't know how it'll turn out. They're basically going to take a certain level of player or they're going to the portal. That's kind of what I'm wanting. They are not jumping into the whole bunch of guys that are developmental stage anymore. Those days are over. I expect them to take 10 to 14 high school kids a year, and the rest are going to be portal guys until they start getting like 14 to 16 high school, etc. There's a level. That's just my opinion. But I expect UCF to basically fill their holes however they have to. And it's as simple as that. They're looking to win and win now. So with that, please like and subscribe. Again, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Make sure you check us out. Inside the Nights, I've got some things coming with recruiting. And I'm going to finish up the top 15 guys for spring practice over the next few days. Everybody be safe. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.